The 21st century is a really bad time for control freaks. Companies should routinely run fire drills for their business. It's no easy job, but this is essential, this is vital.
Well, thank you, Edu. Thank you for taking my call and to talk a little bit about resilience and how to make a company more resilient. You've been working quite a bit about corporate resilience in the context, I guess, historically or recent history of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Then we had more recently an impressive power blackout in the Iberian Peninsula, which I guess brought the question more to the forefront about how to become more resilient. What do you say right now to senior executives? What do you tell them in terms of resilience and how they should think about it?
There's a famous quote from a political advisor that said that the 21st century is a really bad time for control freaks, and I couldn't agree more. We need to start by admitting that we are not in control. There's a full spectrum of disruptions, not just the likely ones, but also those unknown unknowns that could blindside us, that instead of relying on the usual frameworks with probability charts, which tend to ignore rare but catastrophic events, these black swan events, companies should routinely run fire drills for their business. For example, what if a region, a wide blackout, just like you mentioned, hits our operations? What if a key supplier suddenly goes bankrupt? You need to walk through these scenarios. You need to expose the vulnerabilities of your operations in order to formulate responses in advance. And sometimes we tend to react too late, but we need to be proactive here.
I guess when you say this is a bad century for control freaks, you are alluding maybe more to a psychological state of mind, as in being ready to admit that things will happen. That's one of the things that many people have learned throughout the pandemic, the importance of distinguishing between what you can control and what you cannot control. But then you also actually point out that you really need to be doing a lot of planning, scenario planning. You mentioned fire drills. So be very much on top of this. Are people doing this, or where do you see them struggling most?
First of all, nobody wants to pay the premium of an insurance before something catastrophic happens. And the incentives in the corporate world are put in place in a way that this type of anticipative preparation is not rewarded. In terms of mindset that you mentioned before, I think executives do tend to be attracted by narratives that emphasize this epic quest where they have a vision that execute and brings the company to a better state. But in reality, we must admit that sometimes we're shooting in the dark and that we are taking firm decision to bring the company to a point to be in a better place, but we don't know if what we're doing will actually have the consequences we intend. In a way, being exposed to such a plethora of risks, we need to be more like optimistic without hope, meaning we need to act firmly and be brave in taking some measures, but at the same time recognize that we may be not making the right decisions because we do not have all the information that is needed in order to decide what is right, what is wrong. Doing the drills, the planning for disruption scenarios is no easy job. Essentially, it takes mapping all your entire supply chain, which sometimes is really complicated. More than a supply chain, we have a supply network where you have an intricate graph connecting suppliers and sub-suppliers and sub-suppliers. But this is essential, this is vital, because most of the times, executives place a lot of emphasis, care, and put the spotlight on the suppliers that do more business with, but that's not necessarily correlated with those suppliers that could stop your operations if there's a disruption. And in order to disentangle these two, you need nothing but model analysis and systematic evaluation of not one, not two, but hundreds of different scenarios.
So here is another task on the list of the most senior executives in an organization, making sure that that this understanding is actually there in the organization, and that there are specific procedures to make sure that those fire drills happen. You are a widely published scholar in the area of supply chain also, and you talk about something that you call lean fundamentalism in
Yeah.
I guess also in that context. Can you explain that a little bit more, what you mean by that? It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and as an operations professor, I teach lean every year to many executives. And don't get me wrong, efficiency is a great thing until it isn't. Lean fundamentalism is what I call the blind obsession with efficiency and just in time everything, no matter the context. And the problem is that in highly volatile environments, this mindset can be very dangerous. A company that's running ultra lean has no slack when disruption strikes. And we saw it during the pandemic. Firms had optimized supply chains to the bone, and then they couldn't source basic inputs or finished goods when the system was hit with this unprecedented shock. And the irony here is that lean methods work very well only when the world is predictable, which, as we have discussed, it is not. So if you squeeze out all inventory, all backup options, you're essentially betting that nothing serious will ever go wrong, which is betting against nature, and this is a losing game.
Well, thank you, Edo. So here we are learning our lessons after a pandemic, a blackout, and other things, realizing that there is a real thing that is uncertainty, and maybe even some of it that we can't fully forecast. And I think you helped us highlight also how important the role of the most senior executives in this, and understanding that this is not just the task of a specialist in the supply chain, but actually fundamental attitude to how you have to run a company. Thank you so much, Edu.